Okay, I think we are live, so it's safe to go ahead. Perfect. It looks like things are good. This is Tammy, and I wanted to share with you something this kind of just popped up in my world. I guess not really popped up. Let me go back a step. I just finished yesterday and today we did a couple master classes on Inspired to Lead, the 3 secrets to inspiring confidence, others, and potential so that you can handle difficult conversations even if you've never done it before, even if you feel like an imposter, without ruining your reputation in your career. And in both of those sessions, we had some really great conversations, and people were sharing some of the struggles that they are experiencing, both on a personal level and in the workplace, whether they're in a leadership position or they're supporting leaders or they're responsible for creating programs for leaders. And it was in our conversations today that we had a real emotional moment. I shared some of my personal experiences, and I thought, we don't often talk about this. There's, in social media, we put on the big facade how things are all so great, but we don't often talk about the reality of our lives when our relationships at work are not working, when our relationships at home are not working, and how that impacts us. So today I was sharing a little bit more about my story that I don't often talk about in terms of my personal relationships, but it was such a relevant conversation and branch off of what we were discussing related to workplace that I wanted to come and share it with you too. I'm pretty much an open book all the time, and it made me emotional thinking about how empowering conversations can be. And in sharing the process that I teach with others, I was reflecting back as to how it shifted my marriage of 15 years. We've now been married over 20, but it wasn't until this moment that we changed the dynamics in our relationship. And you know that if one relationship is suffering, the others are suffering. Whether it's at work, you're struggling with a colleague, with an employee, with a supervisor, with a stakeholder, with a client, with a patient. So if you have been in my world for a while, you know my background is in healthcare, so nursing and in education, which is a great ground to kind of get your communication teeth cut. It's a fantastic place to be. Lots of experiences with challenging situations, difficult moments, and helping people journey through that. And it was in sharing some of those stories and hearing other people's challenges in the workplace as to what they are working against that someone had said to me, and this is directly a quote from them. She goes, "You know what? I came here specifically to learn how to help my leaders create more comfortable workplaces, how they can handle difficult conversations and manage conflict. But 2 minutes in, I realized I needed this for my personal life." And when she shared with that, obviously my heart melted right away because this stuff had saved my own marriage. And I wanted to share that with you because I don't think we often share the lateral effects of conflict. Now, did work influence my marriage? Did marriage influence work? Either or. I was struggling in both places, to be honest. But in my marriage in particular, I want to share with you quite honestly the pathways we took before and what shifted and how things have changed, because this is the same in any relationship. It's about your investment in it. How much do you care? How much are you willing to move to get resolution? And I want to share it for the other reason is that it was one single conversation, but it took an awful lot of work to get there. And if I can shorten your distance between pain point and where you want to go, then I'm happy to do that with you. So this is going to be a personal video, and I'm going to share with you now a little bit about how my husband and I dealt with conflict. And then if I remember, I got to write this down because, sometimes my memory doesn't serve me well. I will translate that to the workplace because I definitely struggled with some work relationships, and there are parallels. So in this conversation, when this lady shared that she needed it in her personal life, I immediately went to sharing my own personal story. That's how I am. I like to share my lived experiences to help others see the possibilities. And so here's what it was. I say 15 years because it was definitely a long time. We got married in 2000. And in all of our journeys, we've been in New Brunswick for 6 years, in Winnipeg for 6 years. So that's 12 years. But it wasn't until we came back to Alberta that we fixed our shit, literally. So it's roughly around 15 years into our marriage where anytime an issue came up, we were both right fighters. I'm a Leo. He's a Gemini. I don't know if Geminis are like that, but neither of us would back down. Now, maybe you've been in these kind of conversations where you feel so indignified that it has to be your way. They need to hear you. They need to see you. They need to validate you. And there was no backing down. And so here was our typical pattern. We would fight. Eventually, I would get up. I'd storm off into my room, slam the door, and I would sit there and I would wait for him. He never came. And yet, on this day when things changed, 15 frigging years later, the exact same thing was playing out, because here's what would happen. I would think, okay, he didn't come after me. I guess I wasn't mad enough, loud enough, dramatic enough. And so I would get bigger and I would yell louder and I would slam that door harder. And I would sit in my room longer and stew and get even more angry that he wasn't coming after me. Now, I know now that for him, not coming after me was his way of de-escalating things, because I was already escalated. And so for him, he would rather not say anything more and try to keep the peace, I suppose, if that would be his words. And I didn't know that though, right? I just thought he was being rude. He didn't love me enough. He didn't care about me. But in fact, none of that was true. But this is the stories we tell ourselves when people don't act in a way that we expect them to act. And it's no different in the workplace. We all have stories. But it was this day, because I had been now at this point teaching communication skills for at least a year, maybe 2 years. And I sat in my room in all of that stink and all of that anger. And I thought, okay, Tammy, you need to change things up. But it took me 15 friggin' years to figure that out. And so in that room, what I did was I wrote out a perception check. And I do teach this in my courses, but I also have it in a free download. If you are interested, just DM me and I'll send you the Safe Conversation Starter link, and you can download that document where the perception check is also in there as a bonus. But I sat there and I'm like, all right, I want a different result. I am exhausted with the same way that our fights end up every time. We fight, I get up, I leave, he stays, we never come back together, and we often would never even come back to the topic. Like we would just let it go, but not let it go. So I took out my perception check because I'm like, okay, you're teaching students this. It's time to like pull up your big girl panties and have this conversation yourself. So I wrote out what I wanted to say. And then I summoned him to the bedroom, would be his words, but I called him to the bedroom like, honey, would you come talk to me? And let me tell you, that in itself took a lot of work to get him to come to the door, because he never did that in 15 years. He never came to see me in the room. But he did, with a lot of probably resentment, because when he came to the door, he stood there in the door frame, leaning on the wall. What? And this day is such a vivid memory because of how we changed things in that day. So I said to Michael, listen, I'm tired of how we always end up the same result. Like I actually really do want to understand things and move forward. So I'm going to try something new. And I told him, I said, I've written out what I'd like to say. It's going to be really awkward. It's going to feel really awkward, but I'm going to read this and then I'd like for us to talk. And there he stood. Okay. He didn't have any faith in it because, after all, we've done this for 15 years. We've been cycling in the same negative spiral all the time when things didn't go our way. And I read out my perception check, which is a really non-defense arousing way to bring up an issue and to create space for exploration. Such a powerful tool. And as I read this out, I noticed him standing in the doorway, and I noticed his shoulders soften. And I noticed the brick wall that he had in front of him was starting to, push away a little bit, not a lot, but there was movement there. And then he I don't even know if I asked him, to be honest. I may have motioned for him to come to the bed, but he willingly came to the bed, sat down beside me, and we talked for 2 hours. It was the most amazing conversation I had had with him about our issues in 15 years. Now, I share this because I know a lot of people are struggling in their relationships, period. Home, family, community, work, there's conflict everywhere. But we don't often peel back the layers and share with people that we're struggling too. And, on the outside, people thought we had the great marriage, but on the inside, we just couldn't communicate about issues because we didn't have the tools to do that. No one teaches us this stuff. And I want you to think back to your own upbringing, the role models that you had. Mine certainly didn't have it figured out. Avoiding problems was one of the dominant ways in which I saw people deal with conflict. So they would, hide away from it. And I guess I was doing that when I couldn't get resolution, right? I was running to my room and hiding. So in some sense, I was avoiding, but not without a battle, not without a fight first. And then the other way I saw people deal with conflict was drinking. That's not going to do anything. And so many years of self-work, I thought I had it figured out. So by the time I got married, I thought I was doing a good thing and able to communicate in ways that wasn't avoiding and wasn't drinking, but there's an awful lot of land between and a lot of landmines, and I was stepping on them. And so when I finally tried this tool and saw how successful it was, I realized that I'm not just teaching communication skills. I'm teaching friggin' life skills. I'm teaching people how to resolve their problems in ways that don't last for 15 friggin' years so that you can actually have a peaceful marriage. You can have a peaceful workplace. You can have friendships that aren't tearing apart your soul. And it was so important to share that today because of the conversation I had in our masterclass this morning when we were focused on work issues. And somebody so brilliantly just said, you know what, this is actually more for my personal life that I feel like I need these tools. And I'm like, yeah, there isn't one relationship that goes untouched when something is not right in our lives. So if you're struggling at home, that energy, those concerns, those worries, those patterns are coming to the workplace. They may not be as obvious because we take a lot of liberties in our personal relationships that we maybe not have in the workplace. But there's a pattern of behaviors that will show up. So now let me just share with you how this translates to the workplace, because as a target of workplace bullying, I definitely was still the right fighter. And when I was going through it, I just thought I was standing up, speaking up, holding my space, holding people accountable. I was being assertive, as people say you should be. But it was actually, upon reflection, part of the reason why I struggled. Is part of the reason why I could not get to resolution. I had a very focused mind as to what resolution looked like for me. And I wasn't collaborative in any sense. I was focused on taking her down if she was taking me down, right? Tooth for tooth. And it's not always easy to draw those parallels and see the patterns in our behaviors and how they're showing up. And so if you are moving away from conflict, you don't like conflict, the tension is too much for you, the chances are it's the same at home as it is at work. And oftentimes people will just go, you know what, I don't like this job anymore, I'll just leave it. And you can do that. But those lessons will show up again in your new job because you haven't learned how to deal with them the first time. It will always be present for you because that is the lesson you need to learn. Is how do I show up in a way that I can feel seen and heard and valued while still honoring the other person and not creating more defensive communication. Until we learn that, those opportunities continue to present. Now, it took me 15 years of my marriage, and it took me many years of recovery after my bullying experience to see that. And I don't think that's an uncommon thing. Because as I mentioned, we're not taught this growing up. It's not a school subject, which it should be. You should be in communication skills every year that you are in school. It should be a part of your learning. Because without that, we have people who are like me, who were struggling in their marriage, who were struggling at work, who were struggling in their friendships, who were struggling in their family because they thought they were doing the right thing. But without tools, without resources, without a coach, without a mentor, we just bumble along through life until we hit a roadblock. And then what generally happens is we blame outwardly. Well, they didn't treat me nice. It's their fault. When truthfully, we need to point inward And as a Leo, as a proud woman, as a defender of fairness and equality, that was hard to do, to look inward. So I wanted to share this today, that the tools I was talking about today in my masterclass are not just for work. If you are struggling in any of your relationships and you don't have clarity on what the problem is, you're losing sight of what the vision is that you had for this relationship. You're starting to wonder, is this the right one? Because let me tell you, I was wondering that for many years in my marriage. And we would sometimes even have conversations about that. But until we figured out how to talk, until we figured out how to have space and hold space for a difficult conversation without taking it personally, without making stories about how it means we're something less than, we would have never fixed our marriage, and I wouldn't have fixed my career. I wouldn't have got my reputation back because I'd still be that right fighter. Wouldn't have mattered where I worked. I'd still be that same person. And while those qualities are still within me, I now can temper them, and I now know how to come into conversations in a way that, first, because I know my dominant style, if I were to give you any advice in this session, the first thing I would say is get rid of the labels of avoider, accommodator, assertive, because in my experience as being an assertive communicator, I thought I was doing the right thing. And sometimes those labels keep us stuck. So I want you to take those labels and put them aside. Just move them aside and start thinking about the movement through conflict, what people are doing. It's the movement that matters, not the stagnant label. Get rid of those labels. And see, now I'm kind of like, where was I going with that? This happens sometimes. I wrote down work, and that's the only thing I wrote down. But if you are in conflict, if you are in tension, if you are not able to get to resolution, if you're having disagreements with colleagues, employers, family members, spouses, and it's not going where you want it to go, you don't feel satisfied with the outcome, just DM me. How about we just leave it there? Send me a message. I will happy to converse with you and see if we can get clear on your vision, what the goal is, what your problem really is, and where the gap is. So the gap is where the answers are. But sometimes we can't see that because we're too busy doing the same thing we've always done. And as I shared at the beginning, 15 years fighting in a marriage in the same way changed the moment I got clear on what I truly wanted. I didn't want him to come after me. I didn't need him to come after me. What I wanted was to feel connected to him. I wanted to be heard. I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be valued. Him coming after me was superficial. It was really in our heart-to-heart conversation. And so if this is what you're looking for and you're wanting some support with that, or even just to talk about how you can move forward from where you are, just send me a message. That's it. There's no pressure. This isn't a pitch. This isn't like some sales letter that you might see about trying to get you into a program. This is simply just a heart-to-heart conversation because of what we talked about today in our masterclass. And in sharing my personal story, the connection that people were making to seeing themselves inside the story and to recognizing themselves that, yeah, maybe I need some help, maybe I need support, is what prompted me to come on today. That's it. That's all I wanted to share. Give you a bit of insight into how life was not always great for me. In fact, many years, my marriage was not great in terms of how we dealt with conflict. Many years, my work was not great in terms of how I showed up in conflict. And so recognizing those patterns has made all the difference in the world. So with that, I will let you go because I feel like I'm rambling now, and I'm going to go and enjoy the rest of my Friday. And I hope you do as well. Take care, guys.